Hi there, this is the CI/CD UX meeting for March 10th, 2021. I'm gonna jump right into the agenda. We have a couple of FYI and read-only items, but just a heads up, I'm not sure if you saw, we have more friends and family days scheduled, so please have a look and schedule your time off, add it to your agenda. Um, Actually, had the first point. This was a discussion item from the UX leadership call on collaboration between tech writers with UX designers, and this came up from Craig, um, discussing pretty much like how managers are aware or how are things going. Oh my God, it's too early. Sorry. Daniel, do you feel this way? Like it's too early to speak not Portuguese. Um, Anyways, I just want to know how's collaboration going in case we need some support there. So from a tech writer's perspective, they want us to over communicate and ask for their input sooner rather than just in the merge request phase. So I just ask here, how are you doing today, to kind of try to understand that and see if there is anything that I can do to help bridge the gap there or connect with tech writers. And I saw that Nadia has the first point. So Nadia, free to voice your what you wrote here in the agenda.
Yeah, I collaborate a lot with Marcel, our tech writer, on any UI changes or UI text changes or additions. Typically, I just ping him once the planning breakdown starts. So when I'm working on the designs, once things are more or less refined. If I have high confidence about the text, more or less, I get him involved during that phase. So I start working with engineers on planning breakdown and weighting the issues. And at the same time, I'm refining the copy, because at that point, we can already weight the issues usually. So that kind of speeds up the process. So I can do two things at once. But if UI copy is more problematic and it's a more significant part of the design, and then I might get technical writing involved earlier as well. And we also collaborate on some bigger efforts. You see there in the agenda, I linked one example where we're collaborating on descriptions for all CI/CD templates. So Dove and I kind of took our first stab at writing out those descriptions, and now we're pulling in Marcel to do his magic and make it better and more concise and more clear.
This is awesome. I haven't seen anyone working in this model before. I think I love this. I think it make everyone's lives easier. You just work on multiple pieces of the copy in the same flow. Um, have you seen other designers doing something like that, Nadia? Because I think it is a good best practice for us to share broadly with the UX department.
You mean generally collaboration, or what I'm doing for the CI/CD templates?
For the CI/CD template, so creating the spreadsheet and then just working on the UI in a single source of truth, as other than the mockups.
Well, this here, it's a bit of a unique situation, because we need to write out descriptions for all CI/CD templates, and we had to get input from PMs and designers and engineers from across multiple different stages and sections. So that's why we started the spreadsheet, because we had to collaborate like across the whole organization basically to get information about the templates, because turns out that all of the different CI/CD templates are owned by different groups, and it took me weeks to just find people who know something about those templates, and still for some templates I couldn't find the DRI. So that's why. But so I don't know if it could be useful for just like a feature design. Probably I would still prefer to keep everything in the issue, just to keep one single source of truth. But if you need to collaborate widely across the company, and if it's like 10 plus people collaborating on something like this, then I think a spreadsheet can be helpful.
Yeah, I'm looking at it from for my case, like how I would use it, I would try to work on the copy, even if it's for a small, not a small feature, not cross stage, but for example, runners, right? Where we're redesigning runners at the admin level, and then we have settings level. You have so much UI, and for my case, sometimes I have to prototype things so that tech writers can validate and give them context of why certain copy it's written or is proposed the way it is. I think in my case, this would be helpful, like having a sheet or having a source of truth would be helpful to just tell them like, hey, this is everything that we're thinking for a certain feature. But anyways, it's up to you. Feel free to share this. I think it's even if it's not across a larger project, like for the CI/CD templates, I think folks can still learn from this method. So I would encourage you to share with the UX department.
Yeah. I think once we actually implement this, so we'll be adding these descriptions into tooltips for every template, so you can actually see what it does. So once that happens, I'll just share kind of the story of how we came to that.
Awesome. And I added here to the agenda, I think Daniel is going to be the most useful to you. There's a link for you to see who is the tech writer designated to a certain stage group, and then you have the backup. So let's see who's mine. So you have, for example, Nick Gaskill, and then his backup is Axel. So you can figure out who to ping who's working in certain product areas. And Vitka, you also have a comment?
I was gone for a little while, so maybe I missed something. But I just wanted to mention that so Marcel and I, we collaborate very often, and it's almost like every alternate day we get over a call to discuss an issue, because he has a very good method to explain the technicalities behind some very complex features, and I always make use of it. And especially on issues, we think, I think we almost like collaborate every single day. So it's going very well for us.
That's awesome. I'm happy to hear that. And as a reminder, yeah, please continue overwhelming them with requests. And whatever way I think works best for you, that's also a discussion we had in the UX leadership. When should designers do that? Should it be in the UI phase, while in the comment section? Doesn't really matter. It's up to you. Whatever works for you and your strategic counterpart, but make sure that you are over communicating with tech writers so that they can help us clarify UI copy sooner than the development, the merge request phase. So next up is Danielle.
Hey, so I wanted to share a little bit the work I've been doing for a UX scorecard for Autodevops. It's pretty much the first design task that I was assigned to by Hayana, essentially to better understand the current state of the product. And I'll share my screen and share a little bit of the Figma prototype, but there is a link to the issue that has everything on the agenda, so you can take a look at that as well. Let me share my screen. All right. I assume you can all see it already. If you don't, just wave. All right, so this, to be more specific, this was a scorecard for Autodevops with AWS. The idea here was to do as close as possible to the formal standard of a UX scorecard, but I didn't have a specific persona or jobs to be done for this. So I created my own jobs to be done with a lot of input from Hayana and Valerie, which was, when contributing to an application, I want my new code to pass tests and go live automatically, so I don't need to worry about deployments or infrastructure, right? So essentially, the idea here, the persona here would be a front-end developer that has some DevOps knowledge, but not a lot. So they just want to connect their project to AWS, and with every change it goes live, they don't have to worry about anything. But reality and expectations are different things. And as I was setting up the project for the scorecard, I realized that configuring a project with Autodevops and releasing a project with Autodevops are two separate things. And I really just was able to evaluate the first part. So that's what I'm going to show today. So the first step for me was create a new project, right? And right from the start, I wasn't sure which one would be best suited for AWS. Some mentioned AWS, some mentioned other similar stuff, and I wasn't really sure, but I assume all of them could be connected to AWS. So I went with a very simple static site generator. And then I just went to the documentation and searched Autodevops AWS. And that's where it started to get tricky because there were multiple entry points, multiple docs that could serve as an entry point to this process. So here on the sidebar, you can see Autodevops, get started requirements for Autodevops development guide. So right from the start, it was really hard for me to understand what is the default way, the default step one for this. As I went along, I saw a bunch of docs and saw there was an option for Kubernetes and an option for Amazon ECS. From my experience, Kubernetes is kind of like an overkill. It's for larger projects. So I just decided to go with ECS, but it was an arbitrary decision and didn't know for sure if it was the best option for my use case, but that's the best decision I could make at that moment. And then from then on, a lot of AWS, stitching together different docs, different guides. And since I had very little knowledge about this, pretty much if you tell me to create a new role, I create the role with the default options as much as possible and see if that works. So that's what I did. Sign in, create user, create role, create group, create resources, bunch of AWS screens. And then once I had these resources created, then had the keys and whatever information was needed, I would come back to the project and input it there. At some point, I found this setting screen that made me believe that actually Kubernetes is the default way to use Autodevops. And that made me a bit frustrated, like, oh, I came all this way with an option that is not the default option. So maybe I'm doing things the hard way. And turns out I was, but at this point I was committed, so I kept going. Eventually I finished all the steps that the guide suggested. I had all the resources created on the AWS. I had all the configurations on my YAML file. And you could see here, this is the actual pipeline of my repo. It has Amazon ECS on the pipeline, but nothing actually happened. So at some point, some step of my configuration failed, but there were so many steps that I wasn't able to recreate or retrace what went wrong. So that's where I stopped for this workflow. But it managed to teach me a lot about the product. And then some takeaways that I had were that the starting points for Autodevops are very unclear, regardless if you're going with Kubernetes or not. There are too many options. There's no one default place that tells you this is where to start, right? Documentation is very driven by feature and technologies and like the actual technical platforms you will be using, either Amazon ECS, AWS, or Google, rather than the actual workflow that me as a user I'm going through, right? The documentation that actually resembled the workflow the best was a blog post on the GitLab blog, and that was the most useful piece of documentation I had that had screenshots of AWS and took me step by step, rather than the official technical documentation that pointed me in many different directions at once. And the last point is regarding Kubernetes and that surprise I had midway through, where default options really could be more prominent along the process and the documentation. So no matter where I'm looking at in terms of AutoDevops, having a link, something that points to, hey, you're new to AutoDevops, this is the place to start, right? Start reading here. And then you can take the rest. Maybe that existed, but given the amount of information available, I wasn't able to find it in the middle of everything. So after I did this, I wrapped up this workflow. And since I realized Kubernetes was the default way to use Autodevops, I started doing the same with Kubernetes. And after some hiccups, I was actually able to connect it. But there's some issues with my project. So that evaluation is still ongoing. But yeah, this is what I have for now. So I'm not sure if there's any specific feedback I'm looking for from this. So in general, what are your thoughts, and what are some ways you could see me aggregating this back into the working release and and turn this into actual suggestions for the different teams working on this.
First off, thanks for sharing. It's very interesting to see the walkthrough and see the challenges. I think I'm speaking for myself, but I'm assuming that we all have been through these challenges when configuring Autodevops, so making this, navigating through the docs, figuring out how things work at GitLab. So Nadia, can you link here the Autodevops, the Think Big issue, I think that you created with the flows, so that we can also share this with Daniel to give him some previous context of our conversations.
Yep, I'll find it.
Thank you. I'm curious to hear, Daniel, from your point of view in terms of process. What are the challenging aspects of the UX scorecards in terms of, setting up the documentation that's in the handbook? How was the experience of creating and working on this exercise, other than the technical aspects of it and the learnings in the product?
I found the general description of the goals and what the UX scorecard should be very clear. But more given that it's such an intense exercise where you have to do a lot of workflows and then document everything and then have suggestions on top of it, the emotional grading, all of that. I found there's little concrete templates or examples for it. I actually had to sift through previous UX scorecards and find some that were very complete and very thorough, and then use those kind of like as a template. I literally went into the issue, copied all the text, and pasted it on mine and started changing. That was the easiest way for me to structure everything. But in terms of what is the goal of the exercise, I think the handbook was pretty clear on that.
Thanks. And I saw that there was a discussion, a thread with Valerie about the jobs to be done. So I know that this is a separate thing, right? The jobs to be done to kind of wrap the UX scorecard exercise. But in terms of job to be done, do you have any feedback, or what feedback do you have on writing the job to be done? Finding the language, finding the tasks, the scenarios, in combination with the UX scorecard. Is there a gap there?
Yeah, so just to give more context to Nadia and Vitika, this jobs to be done that I showed was actually fruit of many iterations and conversations on a thread with Hayana and Valerie. And I think for me, because I had to write the job to be done for the UX scorecard, and I kind of did both at once, I was too stuck to the technical level, to technical details. So it started much more when creating a new project for AWS I want to connect with. So I had to break it apart and start going higher level with it. I think starting the jobs to be done from previous research is the ideal way, and it helps you keep a higher level to it. So yeah, I think for me, starting from technical workflow that I was working on kind of stood in the way and made me stay too low level with the jobs to be done. So next time I would do this, I would try to start from research. The goal here was kind of start fresh and not look at too much context before I did this, exactly to go at it with fresh eyes. But ideally, you should have as much context as possible in a regular scenario, I think. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah.
It does, yeah.
Did they have the next question?
Okay, yeah. So I mean, when I had my coffee chat with Maria, maybe sometime last month, I remember her mentioning about the direction they're planning with Autodevops, because she's from Configure. I definitely think that if you haven't planned one already, you should check in with her to understand like what are the directions they have in their team for working on Autodevops, because Kubernetes is the I think the way that they have decided to venture into. So there would be some very useful insights for you.
Yeah, I actually did have a coffee chat with her as I was wrapping this up a week and a half ago, and she gave me really good context on that. Explained a little bit why our team's this way and the team is moving in a different direction. So this specific workflow I did hasn't really been that maintained for a while. So that explains why it's so documentation intensive. But it was interesting to do this scorecard, expecting to oh yeah, this is the work of the release team where I'm working at. And actually all the things that I evaluated apart from configure. So that was funny, but it was good to learn about the project anyway.
Right. And in fact, it was really good that you got to know that, like, you ran into this very early in the process, because maybe much later, when you would have already started to work on release issues, you would have found this lack of context, right? I think
Yeah.
this happened for good.
Yeah, and it was a really good lesson on really understanding the structure of teams and the product here at GitLab, right? Where yes, it's such a large and technical product that the configuration aspect of it is a whole different scenario, as a different team that looks at a different context. But also there are opportunities to better tie these two parts together. So I was glad I did this.
That's true.
Yeah.
I don't know if you I don't know if you've seen these conversations around Autodevops that happened during the Think Big session and like the general kind of change in product direction, but there were also conversations about giving Autodevops to pipeline authoring, because it's kind of CI/CD configuration. So it is like a complicated problem. Who should own this, and how do we connect all of these different workflows together? Because Autodevops can also enable so many different things. So yeah, I'm curious about how it will turn out, because there needs to be a lot of cross-stage collaboration to really leverage the AutoDevOps features. But so far, I haven't really seen much happening in that regard. We've had lots of conversations around it, how maybe to create like a working group, to have multiple UX designers collaborating on it, to create a vision that can really leverage AutoDevOps to make it easier to enable GitLab features. But in the end, the decision was made to keep it in configure. I'm sure they can do an outstanding job, but I'm just really excited to see that you're also looking into it, because I think the more designers can kind of get involved in this, I think the more opportunity we have to influence the direction as well.
Yeah, for sure. That is in line with what I talked with Maria a while back. And thanks for the link for the Think Big session. We'll take a look at it and try to integrate this context as well.
Yeah, and just for context, the configure team is working on the plan for AutoDevOps. So the technical folks are working on a technical blueprint for what the MVC or the first steps will look like. And Maria and Justin will be leading the UX vision. So indeed, it's good that we all gather as much context as we can to support them, but they are the DRIs for AutoDevOps, like what Nadia said. I think Autodevops, we all owned it at some point in time, or we are all responsible for it a little bit. So it's an interesting product area. And I suggest, Daniel, that you look into, if you haven't done that yet, look into the release categories. So I linked here the handbook page that has all the categories for release. So continuous delivery, advanced deployments, review apps, feature flags, release orchestration, and pages. I know that with your exercise, you didn't get to the point where you finalized the deployment and it didn't work on the CD part per se of the UX scorecard, but I suggest you go over these pages and read the direction, read the vision, what's next, to get some understanding, understanding of how this relates, for example, to setting up AutoDevOps. It's very useful. It's not, I don't think it's always that we use AutoDevOps, but knowing how things work and how the CI/CD flows connect is the key to success for our little design group.
All right, we'll take a look.
So, if no one has any other comments, then Vitika, you can take over.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen. Just a moment. Yep. Can you see the screen? Okay. All right. So I know that I've been talking about this since last week, about this mapping that I'm doing for jobs to be done for CI. Yesterday, what we did in the CI team was Tom and I, we reserved an hour just to look at and refine everything that was there already on this board. So we started off with like deciding on what our core, who our core executors are. So something that I did not include before was Dakota. So Dakota, we figured that Dakota is kind of a very crucial piece in this whole CI business because they are kind of the decision makers. So we also have to keep them at the center. And as Jackie also mentioned in a comment when I shared the CMS scorecard results, that we can't call ourselves lovable yet because we are hardly providing any value to Dakota yet. So that's just to make sure that this is our focus for future. We have added this as well to the core executors for CI. And after that, we just went on improving what I already had on the board here. And we are only focused on the areas which concern CI, which is the prepare, execute, monitor, and conclude stage, which kind of directly relate to the run and analyze part of GitLab CI, leaving the define and optimize for pipeline authoring. So Nadia, if you want to, you can use the same board and you can just follow the same process that we did and maybe just recycle and reuse the content. All right, so after having spent a lot of time, what we did was we polished all the jobs to be done that we had identified. And we didn't just do that, we also kind of prioritized them. And we made sure that this time we followed all the right practices for framing the jobs to be done. For example, keeping it GitLab CI as a tool agnostic, then persona agnostic, and just following the right rules. And then we also kind of figured, so the one that you're seeing in green is something that we are still working on, reframing. It is not, the work is not done yet here. And the ones that you're seeing in purple are the areas that we identified that we haven't done anything for. So these are the 3 JTBDs in CI that have not been attended to yet. That means we would very consciously take this effort to work on these jobs to be done and at least make sure that we are providing some value to the code executors who are associated with this, which is mostly Dakota in this case. That's our goal for at least this financial year. And what I would be doing next. So one thing that I've already done is I've created a merge request to include all of these changes. And Tao still is yet to have a look at these, and she has to maybe polish a few things on here. But another thing that I'm planning to do using the same board is define the UX goal for this financial year and kind of document that in the handbook. Maybe not for the financial year, just for the quarter, but it would very strictly be tied to this JTBDs that we have identified. And that's how we are planning to prioritize them as well. So that's pretty much it. Yeah, and I remember the comment that Daniel made that the problems that he faced while framing the JTBDs, like it was very difficult to level it up, and we were only focusing on the technical functional jobs. So I would recommend you at least try using this template, because what this demands you to do is this demands you to not only just document the functional and core jobs, but also keep in mind the social and emotional aspects for those jobs. And when you'll come down to framing the JTBD, you'll have so much of information at hand that it just gets easier to keep all those things in consideration.
This is awesome, Vitika. I was going to ask you about how I was using the template, because we discussed this, I think, a week ago or so. And I think you're the first using, right, this resource. So it's a good reminder to connect the jobs to be done. And I think in general, visualizing how things fit in the priority in the map, and looking at the emotional aspects. It's a very positive thing from using this resource, the mural. So thanks for sharing the exercise.
All right.
Yeah, Vitika, I haven't gotten to it yet. There's like fires burning with the pipeline draft designs and release. So, but at some point, I'll definitely reuse this. Thanks so much for doing all this great work. I will definitely be able to build upon it. And I think there will be some overlap as well, especially with the enterprise jobs to be done. We haven't really done much digging. We kind of have them, like in our mind, and we have some epics that are created, but we need to start looking more into it. And I think we will start thinking more about it in the second half of the fiscal year. But maybe like in a couple months, probably I'll be focusing more on it so we can collaborate on it.
That's great.
Vitika, it's very interesting to see me mentioning that issue with jobs to be done, and then this framework that pretty much solves those problems that I had. One question that I have, if I understood correctly, once you broke down these jobs into functional, social, and emotional aspects, I understood you took different pieces of each one of these aspects to merge into one job for that column, right? In that case, what kinds of decisions you had to make into maybe this job should have a little more of the emotional aspect or a little more of the functional aspect, and how did you get to these decisions?
I mean, the emotional aspect, especially, it doesn't get reflected very in a very straightforward manner. But in case that if you feel that that's kind of a very overwhelming factor in this whole jobs to be done. So you mentioned that how did you break it into functional, social, and emotional? I, in fact, did not do that. I started off with, so I'll show this to you again. So what this template, how this is organized is it asks you to put down the very functional task that you are looking to accomplish in this particular stage with the tool. So when I was noting this down, I was not exactly thinking of the job to be done, and I was only focusing on the task. And it was only towards the very end of it, I started to kind of consolidate all of this information into one statement. But it was very easy because we already have this format in picture, right? Like when I want to, then so I can. So that kind of makes it very easy. So that framework in itself, just to draft the statement, it takes care of how you include the social and emotional aspect.
Right, that makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, welcome.
No, we are a little bit over time, but I just want to go over some of the items that are left in the agenda. So my next item is about the Unfiltered, the GitLab Design Talks series on design leadership. So I mentioned this yesterday during the UX leadership call. I'm not sure if you're all there, but I'm interviewing designers that made a transition, or the designers that are now in management or staff roles, to talk a little bit more about what they do. What is it to be a staff researcher? What is it to be a staff designer? What is it to be a design manager? And discuss a bit about skills, background, career outside of GitLab, etc., etc. So I invite you to watch these videos because it's been very nice. It's been great talking to the designers in our team to understand what they think, what they understand as a leadership, and discuss and showcase ways that we can exercise leadership without talking about a role or a change in your seniority. So it gave me a glimpse on how different the career paths can look like for designers in our organization. So I have 2 videos now with Laurie and Marcel. Today I'm uploading the one from my interview with Pedro. And next week I'm speaking with Tori about her transition and what is it to be the manager for UX Foundations team. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Slack channel, in the link there, the issue. There's a link to the Slack channel, but also the pilot issue. I think it's, okay, never mind, doing the pilot issue. If you have any comments or feedback.
First of all, thank you so much for doing this, Hannah. I mean, this was so much needed. I was looking across the internet for similar resources, and now that we have something coming out from our own team, it's just great.
Awesome. That's awesome. And then it's good that they don't have to keep repeating the story over and over to each of us individually. But the main idea of this session is to talk about leadership, of course, taking the example of leaders, right, in organization, but also discuss that leadership is not about your role and the many ways that we as individual contributors of how we showcase and how we can exercise leadership in our roles as designers. So have a look. And if you have any feedback, I'll try to incorporate that in the blog post. I'm hopefully writing this weekend. So, and Nadia, do you want to go over your item?
Yeah, I just wanted to share this slide deck that the product team kind of shared in a very low-key way in the product channel, and I think it's a gold mine. So it's a deck with the post-purchase survey results where customers were interviewed about why they upgraded to a paid tier or upgraded to a higher tier of GitLab. And there's lots of really interesting information there about what features were the deciding factors for them to switch. And you can see what are the top features that made our customers switch to a paid tier. So you can use those insights to maybe brainstorm some ideas around how to better surface those features in the UI, maybe recommend them to users. Of course, we have to be very careful with this, but I think it's important that we keep those in mind and like make sure your product manager have seen this as well, because I brought it up to Dove and he actually hasn't noticed because it was just like buried in the product channel somewhere. So, and also you can reach out to the growth team as well. If you have some ideas that you want to implement, reach out to them and see what they think, because they're really experts on all things, you know, all of the upgrades and all of the things like that. They've done lots of research. So chances are they've actually run some tests around the ideas you might have.
Thank you for sharing, Nadia. Really, this information is like exactly what you say, that stays in the channel, and then we have to dig. So thank you for bringing that up and sharing with us.
Yeah, sure.
We are at time. Anything else? Oh yes, by the way, I have a conference today and tomorrow, so I'm gonna be away from keyboard. If you need me for anything, feel free to ping me in Slack, and I'll try to take care of that. Other than that, I think we're good.
Yes.
Then I'll see you later. Enjoy the rest of your day. If I don't see you anymore today.
Thank you. Bye.